Well, when I look at a TV ad about any pharmaceutical, they always have this, or a print ad, this whole disclaimer about side effects because that's the law. They want you to know if you take this drug, these side effects might happen. They buzz through them real quick.
Right.
And yet, the side effects of something, a pharmaceutical that's widely distributed, is out there without the side effects being known on a label, any sort of consumer alert posted by the government, because it's a food. What's the difference between, a pharmaceutical that's a drug or considered a food? And I know the law that got Oprah tangled up with the beef industry, she disparaged an agricultural product. Does that apply to aspartame? Anybody who might risk here, I doubt they'd come after me, but it might risk here. And when is a pharmaceutical an agricultural product? Isn't it a drug still, even though you eat it?
Sure. It is a drug. And it was discovered as a drug, let's face it, in the 1960s by Dr. James Schlatter. And because it tasted sweet, he decided to go for approval. He and his company, actually, G.D. Searle Pharmaceuticals, decided to go for a sweetener rather than a drug approval through the FDA. And what that means, Laura Lee, is that for a food additive, which is a sweetener, doctors are not required by law to report adverse reactions, nor does the public have to know that there are adverse reactions associated with this food additive, which there are. And so it sneaked in under the food additive label rather than as a pharmaceutical.
Now, it's more closely related to, though, isn't it?
Oh, certainly. But as a pharmaceutical even, I don't think it would have gotten approval because the laboratory tests in the original approval submission by G.D. Searle to the FDA, those tests were falsified. And later, a court, U.S. court, found the same company and same set of scientists guilty of falsifying tests for their IUD, the copper IUD, that they were producing. And it's the same people, the same company, the same years.
Look at their track record. Who is John Olney, who an expert on amino acids, found a lot of this research tucked away in some warehouse? How did he happen upon that?
Well, he's first of all a dear friend of mine, and I highly respect him as the founder of this movement. Actually, he and James Turner, my co-founder of Aspartame Consumer Safety Network, were the ones who sat in this warehouse and pored over these documents.
How did they have access to it? How did they happen upon this stuff buried away?
Turner asked if he could have access to it, and they gave it to him. They themselves probably didn't know what was in all these files at the time, or the people who told him that he and John Olney could go through it. Now, James Turner is an attorney, but John Olney is with the University of Washington Medical School. He's head of neurology up there, and has been for many years, and he is the world expert on amino acids, which is what this molecule is comprised of, among other things. So Turner asked Olney to come and do the search with him, and when they found these falsified tests and the results where lab animals had died and they'd been resurrected again on paper, and that falsified result was submitted to the FDA for approval, they were horrified. And, of course, Jim Turner, coming from a legal background, swung into action and took this to court in Washington, to the Washington, D.C., I believe, Supreme Court, and they refused to hear it. He didn't lose the case, but they just didn't see there was enough evidence to hear the case. And at the time, there was a lot of political maneuvering going on in the very highest of places.
Because a lot of money was resting on this.
Well, a lot of money was resting on it, and let's face it, the CEO of the pharmaceutical company was Donald Rumsfeld.
No.
And so this product had a lot of powerful people on its side, and regardless of whether it was going to hurt people or not, they pushed it through in the 80s. It was first approved or submitted for approval in 1974, and that approval during the Carter administration was denied because it caused brain tumors, and they saw some lab results that showed that the lab animals got brain tumors and had seizures, and so that kept it off the market. But then the administrations changed in the early 80s, and President Reagan's administration was there to approve it.
They're going to unleash this chemical widely into the food supply for a nation's population, knowing that it's going to cause tumors, seizures, the whole thing. What did the lab reports show in those earliest days?
Well, the lab reports, for one thing, there was a Dr. Jerome Bressler who wrote the Bressler report to the FDA, and it was a toxicology report which showed very clearly that this affected almost every organ of the body in the lab animals.
How so?
It caused death. It caused mammary tumors, which translate into human breast tumors, breast cancer. It caused brain tumors, uterine tumors, pancreatic tumors, because after all, a sweetener has a drastic effect on the pancreas. The pancreas is the thing that
regulates your blood sugar.
Regulates the blood sugar, sure. And the laboratory animals had seizures, and many of them died.
Well, people would say that's because in lab animals they feed them or administer to them a huge dosage that's much less in humans. That would be the argument.
Yeah, but that argument doesn't matter because now we've got a 20-year history of death in people. I mean, we're the lab animals now.
Then people could say, well, somebody dies, but who knows really what causes the death? How can you say this organ failed because of this particular chemical? We're exposed to so many in today's life.
Well, it's pretty clear-cut in the case of brain tumors because the diketopiperazine in the molecule, which is one of the breakdown products, caused brain tumors in the lab, and not just once, but many times. And it caused specific brain tumors, astrocytomas and glioblastomas, AAs and GBMs, which are common now in our population, and they were not common 30 years ago.
So here's the evidence. Oh, my. What's the pilot? This is also a pilot hotline. You're saying that a lot of airline accidents, a lot of pilot distress happens because they're, swigging down aspartame-sweetened sodas or what?
Yes. It's not just sodas. It's pilots are using products like Slim Fast to control their weight. They're using Equal in lots and lots of hot coffee on long flights.
I didn't know Equal was aspartame.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
And they're chewing the sugar-free gum, which is the fastest delivery system into the bloodstream.
Because why?
Because there's a sublingual gland. It's called buccal absorption, BUCCAL, underneath the tongue. And that's why nitroglycerin tablets work for heart attack patients. You know, they immediately put that into their mouth like you would a stick of gum, and it affects, gets the heart rate regulated. And in people who are chewing the sugar-free gum, and a lot of the gum has sugar and aspartame in it. They're combining the two.
Hit your teeth and your pancreas, yeah.
Yeah, it's bizarre, but they do it. And so chewing gum is one of the most problematic things now that I'm concerned about, and these breath strips that have it.
The breath strips?
Yes.
What's a breath strip?
The little green breath strips, the Listerine and other products that dissolve in the mouth. Well, that bypasses all the filter systems in the body, the filtration, and that bypasses the liver and goes right into the bloodstream. So people who chew the gum drink the soft drinks, put Equal in their coffee and on their cereal.
And a little bit here, a little bit there, and it all adds up to a big daily dose.
Yeah, in fact, they're probably getting a larger dose than the lab animals were fed. And, in fact, the FDA, we say, illegally increased the ADI, which is the allowable daily intake. It was 20 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and they increased it to 50 milligrams per kilogram because they wanted people to use more of this stuff and not feel that it was harming them in any way. But the ADI is in place for a reason. It means that people should know that they should have a limited amount of anything that has an ADI connected to it.
It's also shocking to me that in the land of free speech, this, as you call it, a stealth law, went into place in 1995 where you can't talk disparagingly about a agricultural product. I mean, where did this come from? Where's our Constitution? And define disparaging is talking about the facts, the history, the data that's been accumulated. Disparaging, or is it an opinion? I don't like aspartame. Is that a bit disparaging? But, aspartame causes seizures isn't because it's a fact. It has to be supported by science.
It's a law, first of all, that isn't needed because we have libel laws in place to protect any product, any manufacturer that is putting a good product out. And they shouldn't have to worry about libeling their product. If it's a good one, then they've got the law in place to sue somebody who is being libelous.
I thought libel applied to people and their reputation.
No, it can apply.
Or your competition could say all sorts of trashy, untrue things about your product, I guess.
Well, it applies to products, too.
And competitive edge if this weren't in place, okay.
Right. And so that law went into place. We generated the Aspartame Consumer Safety Network went and did interviews with media because media jumped on this, not because they thought aspartame was bad, but because they were upset that freedom of speech was being taken away. And so we got interviews. We got hundreds of interviews generated about this law when we found out about it. And so that, in turn, generated 50,000 calls to Governor Bush's office in Texas, pleading with him to veto the bill when it came across his desk the coming weekend in 1995 in September. And he didn't veto it, but he didn't sign it either. And so it went through just by virtue of the fact that it had been voted on by the Senate. So, he should have vetoed it. But that was the law. Oprah was sued under Texas law.
And she was looking at mad cow disease in the beef.
Right.
Yeah.
And I could be taken to court for talking about the sugar-free yogurt, for example. It's any perishable product. That's what the law states. If you
it's perishable.
It has to be a perishable product with a limited shelf life.
I see.
like a refrigerated product, like dairy, for example. And in fact, a friend of mine who owned a small dairy in Waco started labeling his products RBG